Okay, thank you, Mr. Olivier. We will start the meeting. So I call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this meeting on a beautiful day. I know it is here, and I think from most of your opening statement, it looks like it's a beautiful day across the country. So I welcome to the meeting number 12 of House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. When you intervene, please make sure that your language channel is set to the language that you intend to speak, not the floor. This is very important. It will reduce the number of times we need to stop because the interpretation is inaudible for our participants. It will maximize the time we spend exchanging with each other. So with a nod, could our witnesses let us know that they understand how this works? Can I see a nod from all the witnesses? I see. Okay, I think we've got everyone. So thank you so much. And also before speaking, wait until I recognize you by name. And when you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Alors maintenant, comme je viens de faire.
As I just said earlier, I will now go into French. We have to do that. And make sure that your mic is on mute when you're not speaking. We're now ready to start, and I would like to welcome our witnesses for the next hour. So, just a sec, I'll switch language again.
So we have from the Canadian Mushroom Growers Association, Ryan Koslag, Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Officer, and also Ms. Janet Craden, a workforce expert. Welcome to both of you. And also from the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, Sia Couturier, the Chair, and also Portia McDonald-Dewhurst, Executive Director. Welcome again to both of you. Nice to see you again. And also from the Farm or Foreign Agriculture Resource Management Service, I believe Mr. Forth, Ken Forth, President, the sound is working with him. I'm not sure. I think Ms. Sue Williams, who was the General Manager of CanAg Travel, there's a problem with the sound, and unless they can correct it, we won't be able to hear from her. So with that, we can start, and possibly the Canadian Mushroom Growers Association, you have up to 10 minutes, or just hang on. Is it? We have 7 minutes opening statement. Yeah, 7 minutes, so you can split it, or you can do, one of you can do the 7 minutes. So go ahead.
Perfect. So I'll start off and pass it over to Janet, and hopefully you can hear me fine. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Canadian mushroom industry. Members of the committee, we come before you today with some grave concerns. It's now the end of May, and the pandemic started in March, and we're still fighting for our mushroom farms to get access to a single program. We're very concerned about the lack of funding for farmers to fight COVID-19. So emergency funding is needed quickly. Since the beginning of March, our farms have incurred major expenses for COVID, in addition to losing major market share, all while being told they are essential industry. To date, not a penny has been received by our farms. And for the record, our mushroom farms have not benefited from the $50 million for the temporary foreign worker quarantine, because our workers are not seasonal and they're already here. So when farms expand their housing for social distancing for already present temporary foreign workers, these costs are not covered. The $40 million for the food surplus, this does not work because our production dropped significantly after week 4 to eliminate the throwaways. And this program is only working for oversupply since the end of April. Food processing, COVID cost relief is prioritizing the meat industry, and the program is not yet rolled out. So we don't care where our funds come from, but as of now, nothing has been received, and we are going to enter into a territory of too little, too late. So since the start of the pandemic, we know mushroom farms have implemented costly measures out of their own pockets. Personal protection equipment, plexiglass dividers, increased housing, increased transportation, staggering, isolating shifts, as well as hygiene management supervision are some of the responses mushroom farms have made. These measures have been estimated to collectively cost over $250,000 a week for the mushroom industry, and one single mushroom farm alone has spent close to $100,000 in 1 month to protect and prevent the spread of COVID-19 in March. This is in addition to the lost production that has been and still is experienced. More details on these costs are in our full report. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture's request for over $2.6 billion included Mushroom Canada's estimates and was far larger than the government's $252 million. The AFC programs do not work for our mushroom farms. They're broken for industries like the mushrooms or the greenhouses. They don't work. So, for example, the agri-stability, AFC has made agri-stability irrelevant for our industries because of their intensified operations and expanding production with major exports to the United States. So the government must examine the scale of the operations with regards to their $3 million cap. When mushroom farms experience losses of 30% in order to trigger a payment, and that payment is capped at $3 million, the program will not stop that farm from going bankrupt. Additionally, when an operation experiences a major expansion in the last year and the calculation for the payment removes their highest and lowest year, the difference between the new expansion and the payment calculation on the average is too great to help with anything. The government calls this the weighted average. This too should be examined and removed. At the end of the day, during this COVID pandemic, when it comes to agriculture, the government implements every measure imaginable to reduce the payments to farmers, caps, weighted averages, margin references. These are all things to stop or reduce payments. It's not a helping hand, it's a costly hesitation and a disservice to our farmers. So we asked the committee, what does essential mean? It's unfair that this essential industry that Canada cannot live without is dying and struggling and asked to carry the full burden for 3 months while payments have been flowing with record speed for so many others. Although we are called essential also by provinces, very few have included agriculture as part of their strategy for essential services, and hence none of the supports for farm businesses or farm workers. These are difficult times, and the government's treatment of essential work beyond lip service leaves one to question if the government thinks farm and food supply is actually essential. Our second request is regarding support for Immigration Department for improvements to help our skilled and trained agriculture timber foreign workers who are in Canada, including changes to the Agri-Food pilot that was recently announced by adjusting the programs to remove the verification for high school diplomas. We aren't saying the removal of the requirement for a high school diploma, just the removal of the payment that needs to be made to a consultant to verify that high school diploma during this COVID pandemic. So before I pass the microphone off to Janet, I should mention that there has been one area where the government has been very responsive, and that's with regards to Service Canada and surprise inspections. Although, too, we support the inspections and want all workers to be treated fairly, farms have reported that documents are being required over long weekends, and so farm staff who are under extreme stress every day to keep their farm operational also have to work overtime to comply with the timber foreign worker requests, again adding costs, adding burden, and receiving no help for government to date. So with that, I'll pass it over to Janet.
Thanks, Ryan. Can you hear me? Okay. So we're here to report to you today that our supplies of the N95 face masks on many of our farms will be gone in 2 weeks. So the N95 face masks, they're now selling for up to $10 per mask. These masks are used to sell for well under $1. That is 1,000% inflation, committee members. The N95s are being confiscated at the border. India is no longer shipping, and the face masks from China are defective. So if the N95s do not work for healthcare, then they also do not work for the mushroom farms. We need them for worker safety purposes beyond COVID-19 for some varieties of mushrooms to protect our workers from the spores. So we ask the Government of Canada to make agriculture its #2 priority, and please include us in the procurement process. All the PPE support for the farmers has been late. A few provincial programs are only now rolling out 3 months into the pandemic. In Ontario, the new joint federal provincial program for $2.25 million called the Agri-Food Workforce Protection Program for producers is capped at $7,500 per incorporated farm. So with these costs of the face mask, inflation of 1,000%, you can see that the funding is not going to go very far.
Thank you, Ms. Creighton. Unfortunately, the time is up, 7 minutes, so I'm going to have to move on to our next organization. And for the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, either Ms. Dewhurst or Ms. Couturier, up to 7 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to your study. I'm the Executive Director of the Council, and our presentation focuses on the need for a national labor strategy to stabilize worker availability through the pandemic and beyond. The workforce needs of Canada's ag industry is something that we've been examining for more than 10 years. Through research, it's clear that the industry cannot continue to produce healthy, safe, and affordable food for Canadians.
Si on peut faire une petite pause, Monsieur le Président, pardon, on n'entend pas la traduction parce que la dame devrait rapprocher le micro de sa bouche, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. Sorry about that.
Can you try it again?
Yes, I shall try that again. So the research is clear that the industry cannot continue to produce healthy, safe, and affordable food for Canadians and for global consumers without ensuring workers are secured and in place to do their jobs. The COVID pandemic has put a greater spotlight on this and confirmed that there's no more time to waste. We must work toward longer term and systemic solutions to the persistent labor shortages the ag industry is facing. CARC's labor market research has clarified that job vacancy rates in the industry are as high as 10%, exceptionally high compared to other industries, and those vacancies are impactful and result in close to $3 billion in lost sales revenues annually for food businesses alone. Beyond financial losses, the inability for farmers to fill all of their vacant positions with either Canadian or foreign workers makes the business of food production in Canada very stressful and difficult. International workers, as you know, come to Canada to work on farms and fill positions when Canadians can't be found. Although approximately 60,000 foreign workers are brought in each year, tens of thousands of positions still remain vacant. The latest assessments indicate that the expectation is that the labor gap will grow to 123,000 positions by 2029. Businesses that aren't able to fill vacancies face production losses and excessive stress. Owners cancel expansion plans, and many report leaving the food business altogether. Securing a full team of workers is challenging for farm businesses at any time. It's especially challenging during a pandemic. Yet the pandemic has highlighted that food production is part of Canada's critical infrastructure, and maintaining the ability for food producers to operate effectively, even during a global health crisis, is critically important to every one of us. Food businesses are expected to continue to operate through the pandemic and thankfully have been designated as essential workplaces so that Canadians can enjoy homegrown fruit, vegetables, meat, dairy, and grains. However, keeping ag businesses operational has not been easy for either industry or government due to the already extensive labor shortages the industry faces and the unique workforce management challenges that exist. COVID has highlighted not only how complex it is to maintain public health during a pandemic, but also just how important and complex it is to manage workforce issues in this industry. COVID has certainly put a spotlight on the need for focused attention to address the persistent or pervasive issues of workforce shortages that continue to undermine this industry's ability to operate at full capacity. There is a clear need for a national labor strategy to stabilize worker availability and food production through the pandemic and beyond. And I'll pass it off to Cyr.
Merci, thank you for the invitation to participate. During COVID, obviously, employers have been struggling with extensive uncertainty about meeting their staffing needs. They have been uncertain about operating realities during the pandemic and about getting their foreign workers into Canada on time. A lot of these decisions have resulted in planting and proceeding with production have been filled with an exhaustive list of unknowns. Farmers continue to lack clarity about what their staffing levels will be this year because they don't know when if or when the international workers will arrive. And they also don't know if worker absenteeism will increase for the Canadian and international workers due to wage benefits like CERB, public health directives encouraging people to stay home, and limited PPE. We just heard about that. They don't know if new entrants like students can be enticed to join the industry during global health pandemic and convinced to stay for the whole season. They also don't know the extent to which disruptions across the value chain will impact their operations. In addition, employers have also been struggling with keeping up to date on new and evolving workplace protocols. An extensive list of government agencies and federal, provincial, and local levels all set expectations for employers. While learning the rules and recommended practices, employers are also working to secure their staff and are responding directly to health and safety concerns of their employees, clarifying rules around new work arrangements, physical distancing, PPE, housing, commuting, outings, etc., etc. There's a clear need to support the industry employers with their complex HR management activities. CARC has been doing this through the pandemic and providing access to all farm operations across the country. It's very complicated, and farmers in all of their businesses are still struggling for all of this. The Government of Canada has demonstrated a commitment during COVID to meaningful consultation, coordination, and action to address pressing workforce needs. Better mechanisms have been implemented to connect industry, government, and so on. What is needed now is to expand upon this good work and develop a national labor strategy with longer-term activities to refine consultations and improve labor supply and skills. Now is the time to ensure the food production system stays operational through COVID and beyond, and is well positioned to overcome the persistent labor shortages that have been limiting growth. What is needed is the proper time, resources, and attention put forward to develop an action and national labor strategy. It's time to listen to the various recommendations of so many reports and committees that have been reviewed this serious issue about labor. The Agri-Food Economic Strategy Table outlined key recommendations for addressing labor shortfalls in the long term are aligned with those proposed by RBC, Conference Board of Canada, CARC, HUMA, AAFC's National Labor Task Force, and the Barton Report. What all these reports stress is that there needs to be a strategic coordinated action to do three things: continue to monitor the numbers with quality, labor market intelligence and research, increase the supply of labor by improving access to temporary foreign workers and generating Canadian interest in ag jobs, and improve the knowledge and skills within the industry by upskilling workers and supporting HR management skills of employers. We are supporting already, CARC has been, provincial efforts in these areas, but a national approach is still missing.
Right. Thank you, Monsieur Couturier.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to cut you off here. And we'll pass it on to Foreign Agriculture Resource Management, or FARM. Mr. Forrest, you want to do the opening statement for up to 7 minutes, please. Go ahead. You need to unmute your microphone.
There we go. Okay. There is no doubt the farming community in Ontario and Canada will never forget 12:01 Wednesday, March 18th, as it marked the closure of non-residents and in particular farm workers under the seasonal worker program from entering Canada. This was devastating news to stakeholders involved in agriculture and the agri-food business, and this started the massive stress that still remains within agriculture. At the start of the week of March 16th right through to the third week of May is noted as the peak time frame for seasonal workers to arrive in Ontario. In excess of 8,700 workers were already scheduled to arrive, flights arranged, airlines positioned, source countries busy documenting seasonal workers, farm operators preparing for the arrivals, and the workers themselves preparing to leave their families for another season. Overnight, everything came to a standstill. The phone lines jammed with first farm operators questioning where if they were going to get workers, will they arrive in time for spring vegetable planting, fruit tree priming, harvesting, asparagus, ginseng shading, nursery production, flower production are always in high demand. In the following days, borders closed to almost all source countries, providing farm workers to Canada. The media quickly became the focal point of everybody's day. Fortunately for all stakeholders, the announcement came quickly that the exemption under the special exemption was approved for non-resident temporary farm workers to enter Canada. However, farm operators had to act quickly to fulfill their obligations that were not imposed on both farm operators and arriving temporary workers. Farm operators' obligations. Number one, monitor all persons for the virus. Number 2, facilitate self-isolation according to public health requirements. Number 3, meet minimum standards where housing is provided, social distancing, 2 meters apart. Ensure individuals in self-isolation are separated from those who are not. Maintain zero contact with older adults. Provide personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, thermometers, as well as any necessary material to practice adequate sanitation. Services are to be cleaned and disinfected regularly. Access to regularly washing hands with soap and water or use sanitizer. Support efforts to minimize the spread of the virus during the following 14-day isolation period. The Ministry of Health. The Ontario Public Health offices play a huge role in the seasonal agriculture worker program by providing seasonal housing inspections every 8 months. It should be 8 months on the document, thereby adding to the integrity and success of the seasonal worker program. Farm operators relied on the public health offices to make sure they adhered to the virus guidelines, as well as the guidelines set forth by the Federal Minister of Health and the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability. Partial solutions were implemented with a focus on making sure everyone maintained the following guidance. Farm operators planned for a 14-day isolation period with newly arrived farm workers. This includes closely looked at the housing plans to reorganize if need to meet guidelines. Social distancing, beds were moved further apart. In some cases, partitions were put up. Hotel rooms were rented. Purchase of sanitary cleaners and masks, like I've already said. Agreement with the farm operators for food provision beyond the 14-day self-isolation period. A number of farm employers have arranged for food pickup and delivery on an ongoing basis to eliminate the farm workers' need to go to the local grocery stores. The farm workers are made aware of the agreement is voluntary and they have the option to change the process. It has been found that farm workers are generally in agreement with the pros and cons of leaving the farm in a frequent basis. It also should be noted that the general public in Ontario do not like to see foreign workers going in the grocery stores anymore. And it's pretty pathetic, actually, how Canadians are acting in some cases in some food stores, but that's the reality of what's happening today. Added thought was put into farm equipment and how best to keep distancing in play. Farm operators have installed plexiglass and other dividers for the workers on planting machines and when they are sitting closer. The small measure is huge when considering it provides a barrier against potential cough or sneeze. Monitor the farm workers on a daily basis. Document a plan to remove and quarantine any worker who shows signs of the virus, to include notifying the public health office. Maintain distance to the extent possible during work hours and supplying masks, glasses, and face shields. Receive and take action on communication updates periodically sent by our office in relation to the virus updates. Simply, these cost the growers a ton of money, and nobody has been there with us on this basis. The health and safety of Canadians and seasonal temporary workers in Canada remains paramount. Farm operators and farm workers acknowledge that they have an obligation to remain under strict guidance for the duration of the term of employment. While the virus continues to present itself, the food supply chain remains viable through the long-standing relationship between Canada. The bottom line is we need the government to have our backs in this thing if they want a stable food supply. The farmers of this country have basically been left on their own. Support for agriculture has fallen drastically short. Agriculture stability is a word that is a phrase that's like to be talked about in urban Canada. Ag stability simply does not and has not ever worked. We just need our back covered should we want Canada to have a food supply. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fort. And now we'll go to our question rounds. And to start us off for 6 minutes, Ms. Rood, go ahead for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters for being here today. Mr. Forth, I want to address our seasonal agriculture worker program. Could you give us an idea of how many vacancies there are right now that are not being filled by workers who have not yet arrived, or how many workers we still have we are anticipating on arriving at this point, so kind of where we're at?
Yes, thank you for the question. As of today, we have we have arrived 13,438 seasonal agriculture workers in the province of Ontario. Oh, I'm sorry. That was last year, 13,438. This year we've arrived 10,964. So we are basically at the 81.6% of what is expected to have landed here. Overall, in all the temporary worker programs that we administer, including AgStream, this year we've landed 16,474. Last year we had landed 19,087. So we're on the three programs combined, we are at the 86.3% of what is expected to have landed here.
Great, thank you for that. Now, you mentioned that there's a lot of massive stress out in the industry with regard to labor shortage, especially in our produce industry. You mentioned fruit, vegetable, and I understand yourself, you're in the vegetable production. And can you give us kind of an idea of, some of these farmers are cutting back production, we've heard as much as 25%, partially due to the fact that we are low in our numbers for the seasonal workers arriving. Time factor, I guess, is one because they haven't arrived on time, and maybe some farmers haven't planted yet. And I know that there's a lot of uncertainty with the harvest and getting our workers here. So in terms of food security and our skilled workers, how do you anticipate this playing out in the industry over the course of planting that's still going on and looking forward into the harvest as well?
Well, we do know that crops like asparagus, they expect a 50% loss in the asparagus crop this year because the workers weren't able to get here on time for that. Some of the vegetable people that actually plant crops annually have cut back as much as 25% because they're afraid of what the market's going to be. Like in a lot of cases, the restaurants aren't open anymore. So where's that food going to go? And the fact that we are short of labor up to 20%. So they have cut their production. The other folks that can't cut their production, again, are asparagus and strawberries and tree fruit and grapes and all that kind of stuff. And they're doing as much efficiency as they can. But lots of people are worried that they're going to plant a crop or have a crop, and all of a sudden there won't be anybody to take it off. And that, if anybody thinks, well, next year will be better, I can tell you if that kind of devastation happens on any farm, next year isn't going to happen.
Thank you for that. And I've heard that there's, the government has put out this program for $1,500 per foreign worker to help cover quarantine costs. And I'm just wondering, have you heard from any farmers that they've actually received that money yet? I've heard that, they're thankful that there is some money available, but some of these costs per worker, if they're housing them in a hotel, is $3,000 to $4,000. So can you let us know where farmers are at with receiving money in that program? Yeah.
I've heard that some people have some problems accessing it, but I haven't heard anybody getting it yet. But it's early in the game. We still expect it to happen. The Minister of Agriculture called me personally before the announcement and told me it was $1,500, and that's the way it was. And I thanked her very much. And then Agriculture Canada got involved in it, and there's a whole bunch of stipulations and T's to cross and I's to dot. That's not what was told to us. And some people reiterated on a phone call the other day from Ag Canada that this was a windfall. Well, $1,500, $1,000 of it at least is the wages we have to pay for them to sit in the bunkhouse, plus all the other things that happen with that. Like there isn't much of a windfall there. And if you're into hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff, you're into a couple thousand more. So, and most of us have either rented more bunkhouses space or put trailers in or whatever, so we could isolate different groups when we're here. So gratefully received, but don't give me any hassle about $1,500 because it doesn't cover it all. It does help though.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time is left? Sorry, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Oh, about 50 seconds.
50 seconds. Just quickly, you've also mentioned, Mr. Forth, about massive stresses, and I'm wondering, can you just touch on any of farmers to do with integrity audits? We've heard some negative things about those.
not their fault and integrity, but without a doubt, in the last 5 years, they have scared the heck out of farmers, without a doubt. And now they're doing these virtual tours of the bunkhouse, and that's something that the local public health units have already done. I know where they're going, and I have to say it is getting better. I'm not getting the complaints I used to have. All we've asked for them to do is be professional about it. No personal agendas here, and do everything. We want every inspector to do it the same. Ask for what you want. The other day, we even suggested that they film the bunkhouse prior to the people going in, because one inspector asked a farmer to go in when it was already isolated.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Thank you, Mr. Rood. And now, Mr. Ellis for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. So this goes out to the mushroom growers. I just wonder how the last 10 years of your business, has it been up, steady, or how has it been in the last 10 years?
Yeah, so I'd say it's been a steady increase for us. There's been a lot of expansion across Canada, and there's been increased.
I'm sorry, Speaker, I can't hear the.
Apologize for that. Okay. So we've had an expansion over the last 10 years. We've had increased exports to the United States at the same time.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I can't hear.
Yeah, we have a real hard time hearing you, Mr. Kosleg.
How about now? Is that working?
I hear you pretty good. How is it good for everyone?
Apologize.
Give it a try again.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we've had an increase.
No, it's not. It's not working. Can we,
Janet? Could you fill in?
Can we just pause and make sure that your sound? You can work with the technician there. We'll just pause for a minute.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I keep hearing the interpretation in the background as well. I am on English, but I am hearing interpretation going on in the background simultaneously.
That we have had an increase in production over the last 10 years, in addition to that going to the United States. So we say about 40% of mushroom production in Canada goes to the United States.
Okay, and speaking of that, how has your export market been affected?
Yeah, so the exports, there was a bit of a drop on the initial onset, and so there was, I guess, a bit of a reaction in the retail sector. In addition to the loss of the food service. But now actually the exports to the United States have increased as they've been experiencing the COVID situation as well. And so some of that food service has gone down to the United States. But that's not going to be sustaining for a long period of time. We're expecting that to be drying up probably within the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay. How many growers are actually across Canada?
Yeah, so we look at the Stats Canada, I think, has over 132 growers, but for as far as our membership and the sizable commercial production, we're looking about 52, which employ about 4,500 people across Canada.
Okay, you mentioned, I believe you mentioned in your 7 minutes, you talked about, what was that? You talked about oversupply, and you talked about you cut production back. Could you just explain that and
Yeah, so mushrooms are a fairly responsive crop. They grow about 4% every hour, which doubles in size every 24 hours, essentially, I believe is how we say it. But essentially, when there was the oversupply and they were throwing away product, they cut production back. It takes about a month from beginning to finish for a mushroom to start growing. So when they had the oversupply and were throwing it away, they were also adapting and reducing production in order to not have the throwaways. So, with that, the oversupply situation kind of ended, and they answered that problem. But there's been some who have suffered more than others.
Okay, you mentioned about one farm that spent $100,000 a month on PPE. I just wondered what the average size is. Is that what would the average farm spend, I guess? And you talked about the province only letting, I guess, $7,500 per farm that would be used very quickly. So what were you looking for per farm, I guess, on average?
Yeah, I guess per average cost is kind of difficult because there is a wide variety of the types of production, and certainly like when they are having costs that high, they are putting in the most maximized benefit and prevention methods, the plexiglass to the masks to the increased housing to increased transportation. So we looked at it in assembling a cost through a survey of our members, an estimated cost of $240,000 per week.
Okay, and that's through your 52 farms, or is that through the 132 growers?
That's through our 52 farms, yeah.
Okay, so it would be higher if you included all the growers.
Yeah, not yes and no. Yeah, so we say that we probably represent over 90% of the mushrooms that are found in grocery stores and the exports to the United States.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I guess okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry, Janet here. Just speaking about the PPE, which I've done a lot of the research on. So what the farms did, they very early on, they started to move quickly to invest in plexiglass, extra housing, extra busing, and so that's why we're getting these costs. And so what we're seeing with the programs, unfortunately, is that there seem to be May forward. So all of the work that's been done with the plexiglass in March and April will not have any reimbursement the way the programs are being set up. And so we're asking for help to get that mended as the programs are being developed. So at least the farmers will get some fair reimbursement for putting all this preventative stuff in, because we don't want a situation like the meat processing with outbreaks. We can prevent it with this kind of good practices that a lot of our growers have done.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, provincial help. You mentioned the one program, $7,500 per farm, but has there been any other provincial help?
Yes and no. There's some provincial programs where in fact, we were just on a call with the provincial ag minister, Minister Hardeman, before this, and now we're on a call with the provincial ag minister from BC. There's a new procurement program in BC, but again, I think we're not sure. It isn't really any price offset, and the masks are running $350 a mask, and we don't know if they're the N95s. Also in Alberta, there was a procurement. They included us right in the procurement process with their healthcare workers. But then we were quite excited. We were waiting for our supplies for a month, and then we just got an email saying now that we're not part of it. So the dentists will be getting it, but not farm workers, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ms. Graydon. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. And maintenant, Madame Desbiens, pour jusqu'à 6.
Madame Desbiens, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to my colleague for giving me this first shot at this round of questions. I come from Charlevoix, and I visited all my farm constituents. And I talked to Champignon Charlevoix, Charlevoix mushrooms. It's a terrifically modern and beautiful setup. They supply all the hotels, all the resorts, and so forth. Of course, unfortunately, right now, all the orders have dried up. They do all sorts of specialized products as well, pickled mushrooms, and of course, they used to do agro tours of their premises, but that's all closed. So they've developed. They had started to establish online sales, and now they realized that they could develop this further internationally. But they're limited by the entire complexity of international relations, of trade agreements, etc., and, of course, safety and security of online operations, hackers, etc. So my question would be, are there any means by way the government could invest in the future? The Bloc Québécois talking after COVID-19. Is there anything that can be done now to save some of these businesses for internet e-commerce? What do you think?
Opportunity, and certainly the Ontario government too has provided some funding for doing the online sales and creating portals for that. I would just say that we have to recognize that there has been a huge burden in the cost for COVID for these farms that have not been assisted at all. But then at the same time too, with the loss of production, these things are, this is a very large scale. We're talking about grocery store supply as well as the food service supply. I'm not sure if the logistics for having it individually supplied through online to homes is really a direction that the industry would be going. It is a fairly large scale, and that's where we have lost. So. And
Janet here. I would just also say that, yeah, we are very appreciative of the Ontario program, and if there was more support for that, then mushrooms, some farms would be able to consider it as an option, because skip the grocery store is very popular. Okay. And it's, I totally agree that it's the new way of doing business, the boxes that come to your home, and there's a lot of companies that are actually very successful with that. And I've heard of one mushroom company that has done that in Vancouver, and they're very successful. So we'd be interested if the federal government would support that, yes.
Ouais, bon. Oui, on demande aussi
Yes, and of course, if we had a better postal service, that would probably be better too. 2 or 3 days, 4 days, rather than 2 or 3 weeks. Post Canada right now, they're overloaded. Should invest there as well. Now let's get back to labor issues. When we talk of seasonal workers, we at the Bloc think that it's the federal government that would assume the quarantine responsibilities of these individuals coming into the country. It's not up to the individual farm business or the provinces even to save what they can. You know, everybody on board, cousins, uncles, everybody on board for planting season, etc. Or to you'll house a few, he'll house a few. Could we not loosen up this support program for the $1,500 per worker? You know, at this time of year, everybody's in the field. Nobody's got time to be taking care of the paperwork at the back office. Do you think we could do something to loosen up the criteria for that $1,500 program? What do you think of that? What's your point of view on that?
Is that for mushrooms again?
Oui, ou la main d'œuvre?
Yes, mushroom, or Mr. Couturier, who's more focused on labor issues?
Our workers are actually year-round, and they're actually in Canada already. So we have about 50 workers that were outside of Canada on vacation when the travel restrictions began. So about 10 of them have been able to return, and they'll be using the Ag Canada $1,500 per worker, 50 million program. But our farmers have been putting a lot of money into investing in hotels, extra housing, to create extra space, and to actually also isolate workers if they may have come in contact with COVID. And we get no expenses. We are not allowed to use that program. So we're completely on board with, please loosen up the criteria so that some of our mushroom expenses can be covered. We're totally on board with that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. So independently, whoever can answer should answer. If we compare what's happening in the States for support to producers compared to what we're doing in Canada, Madame Desbières, you can talk as fast as you like, but your time is still up. Well, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for helping us understand how this crisis is affecting yet more sectors within our agri-food and agricultural sectors. Maybe I'll start with the mushroom growers. Ms. Creighton, just first a comment to you. Your comment about the 2-week supply of face masks is very concerning, but it kind of echoes concerns we've heard in other committees. At the Government Operations Committee, we've had troubling questions about the status of our national stockpile, and it's something certainly that we as a country really need to take note of. But Mr. Kozlag, I just wanted to go back to your comments, because you were the one that said mushroom growers are still fighting for access to major programs, that it's going to be too little, too late. Our committee before COVID-19 was engaged in a study on the business risk management programs and a litany of complaints that exist. I just wanted to get your reaction. Our federal Minister of Agriculture said earlier this week that farmers, growers, and producers need to access already announced support programs in order for her to make the case in cabinet that more money is warranted. So you're saying that those programs are hard to access, but she's saying you need to go and access it before I make the case for more money. I just would like to get your reaction to that, please.
Yeah, so we spoke to the minister directly about this as well, and identifying the issues with accessing these programs. So our issues are really two major ones. One is that there is a cap, and these farm operations are running into the cap for the $3 million. And so if you think of the scale of operation, when you're capped at a certain amount and you have greater losses than that, then this isn't going to be enough in order to sustain that farming operation. In addition, there is a situation where we are having expansions and investments in capital in order to expand the operations. And so when there's a weighted average elimination of your highest sale year and elimination of your lowest sale year, you actually do, if your timing is correct, you eliminate a substantial amount of revenue from that calculation, which it would again put you at a dire strait for any kind of payment that you'd receive from that. So yeah, those are the two major issues that we have with it, in addition to, even say the premium costs that would be incurred for some of these farm operations for potential payout, which would be maxed at the $3 million. So these are the things that these farms are weighing. They have accountants and they have people who are examining this all the time. And so we hear from them that this isn't something that they want to be participating in. And at this point, they need some assistance, and this is not the program to do that.
And Janet here, I just want to say, we had one of the farms, their accountant used the new Ag Canada agri-stability calculator, and found that it's like a case study that we have in our report that we're going to make available to the committee later on this week. And basically the farm, it's unsustainable. The farm goes broke by the time they're able to, access the money. So we have that in a case study, and we'll share that with the committee. Thank you.
Great. And we hear repeatedly from, I think, every one of our witnesses about the great concerns we have with our access to a reliable labor pool. And one of the themes I've been trying to build in is how do we build resiliency into our system? Now, we had the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship appear before this committee to talk about the pilot program that's been established to provide a pathway to citizenship. And I know the mushroom industry is going to be one of the eligible industries for that. Can you just offer some comments on that? Because it is a pilot program, and I think a pathway to citizenship has been something that's been talked about for some time, but I'd like to get some of your feedback on how that may help you establish some resiliency in your access to labor in future years.
Yes, thank you. So we're actually very excited about the Agri-Food immigration pilots, and we've worked very closely with the immigration department for 4 years. And we actually had workshops with the farmers or with the farm workers up until the economy was just shut down in March. And we felt we would have maybe about 100 to 200 that would apply this year. But we've been very disappointed because they have a small criteria, which is that they have to have their high school certificates. But the problem is the schools are closed in their countries. They can't get their certificates. So the education assessment company said, why can't we, if they got a high school certificate already in Canada, and I saw about 30 or 40 at all of the farms I visited in March before COVID struck. And so why don't we get started with that? And then we will go get the original high school certificate when the schools and the economies open. But so far, immigration hasn't been interested in that. But
And
to us, that makes sense.
If I can just quickly
ask, otherwise we have nobody that can apply this year.
And what kind of opportunities have you been told by the department for, like, how many opportunities are there going to be during this pilot program for you to give feedback on an ongoing basis?
Well, we provide feedback sort of unofficially, and we spoke with the minister's office about 2 weeks ago. But we're hoping that they will take some official feedback and make some additional changes very quickly, which could include this simple administrative thing, little change of wording so that our workers could start applying right away.
Great.
That's what we hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Graydon, and thank you, Mr. McGregor. And now to Mr. for 5 minutes, Jeremy Padzer for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to start questions for the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council, and either one of you can answer. About a month and a half ago, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture called support for Agri-Food. So from your perspective, is Canadian agriculture better off now than it was, say, 2 months ago, and is it receiving enough support?
I'll answer that question because I also sit on the Canadian Federation of Agriculture board as well as CARC. I don't think that they're better off now with the support programs that are out there. Mushroom guys and folks have already said that the agri-stability is not applicable. We know that BRM is it's not suitable for a lot of the crops that are produced in Canada. So from that perspective, in terms of labor supply and so on, you've already heard from some witnesses today that they're not better off. There's still lots of uncertainty. People are going bankrupt, and there will be lots more over the next year or so.
Yeah, it's definitely a dire situation that's being painted there for sure, and just the gross lack of interest to support agriculture as a whole has been a problem. When it comes to the number of staff as well as the health and safety standards in place for COVID-19, do you believe that we're on track to maintain food production here in Canada, or are we at risk of any breaking in our domestic supply?
There's already been some breakage in the distribution channels initially, and it's starting to come back up. But there's still a dire need for production farmers to be able to get their crops off the fields or out of the ocean. In my case, because I also work with seafood farmers, and in particular because of the way the value chains have changed from retail to back and forth in the restaurants, and that's causing major problems with a lot of the small producers throughout Canada, in fact.
So over the last couple months, we've seen thousands of young Canadians apply for financial support from the federal government as they're looking for summer jobs. And, at the same hand, we've also got thousands of temporary foreign workers who are continuing to fill the demand for labor in the agriculture sector. So given that, and we've heard that there still are shortages in getting temporary foreign workers in, what can we do to make the agriculture sector, I guess, more appealing to young Canadians in order to fill the labor shortages that we are currently experiencing? And I'm asking this in a sense that, like, I grew up on a family farm, so I get the benefits of working on a farm and what it all takes. But if I'm a kid from the city, what could we maybe do as an industry to try to make this more appealing for young Canadians from the city?
Great question.
I'll ask Portia, our executive director, to answer that one.
It's a great question, and something that, this labor challenge that the industry is facing is very complicated. You've heard from many witnesses, including those today, about various aspects. And we've always said at CARC, we've been working on this with different industry stakeholders from across Canada, that a multifaceted problem needs a multifaceted solution. And a key piece of that is, how do we encourage more Canadians to be even aware and more knowledgeable about how food is produced, that buying Canadian is a great thing in order to support this industry. And it also going as far as saying this is a great industry to work in. It's got fabulous appeal in terms of environmental and in terms of a strong customer base that's only growing. So how do we get more Canadians interested in agriculture is a very important question, and one that needs to be tackled as part of a national labor strategy. That's what we've been vying for many years, and that's what's necessary right now, and aligned with so many recommendations that have been put forward by so many different studies. So now's the time to do that.
Yeah, so quickly here, I got about 30 seconds left. So there's cool programs out there like Ag in the Classroom to get high school kids engaged and just informed of what's going on. But as far as post-secondary options, I mean, there's trade schools and things like that. Is that an option for agriculture going forward to get more of the workforce engaged?
Sure, there's lots of things that we need to be doing. We need to be looking at not only people that are aware about working in the industry, but also thinking about the business students and the science students and pulling them into this industry. There aren't enough youth, though, to fix this labor shortage. So we need to be thinking much more broadly. Protecting access to foreign workers is critical, modernizing that approach, and also thinking about others within the full spectrum of the Canadian workforce.
Thank you, Ms. Dewhurst. And now, Mr. Cody Blois for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their testimony. I'm going to start with the mushroom farmers. Certainly, from Mr. Ellis's question, it sounds like the industry has done quite well in the last 10 years. Is this a largely labor-intensive industry? Is that maybe to you?
Yes, it's a very labor-intensive industry. I think it's probably close to 50% of costs, and every fresh mushroom that you find in a grocery store is picked by hand.
And so I guess I was pleased to hear that for the large part, labor uncertainty hasn't been an issue for your industry. I think Ms. Creighton might have said it was 50 workers, temporary foreign workers at least, that were not available at the start of the pandemic. Is that correct?
I'll let Janet answer that one, but I would say that we do have a major labor issues. We're always in a situation of having high vacancies for the mushroom industry. But
as it relates to temporary foreign workers, I heard 50 temporary foreign workers were outside the country. Ms. Creighton, can you confirm that?
Yes. So actually, our sector has 70% Canadians, and we have about 900 temporary foreign worker program agricultural stream workers across Canada. So they were in Canada. So the 50 were the ones just on vacation. So, but like Ryan said, we have a 20% job vacancy rate on a regular basis. So we're fighting that still. So some farms have oversupply, and other farms, they have
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to keep.
They still have a labor shortage.
I want to keep moving. Appreciate that. What about the margins in the mushroom industry? In terms of, is this a high value margin product? Is it low margin? Just as quickly as you could.
I can't really speak to that, honestly.
Maybe Janet, in terms of the margins, is that something? Is this a low margin industry, high margin? I guess maybe it depends on product.
We know it's high expenses because of the capital investment and the amount of labor. We can look into that and get that back to you.
That would be very helpful. Can you speak to, I mean, we heard about the additional costs. Has this created a situation where farmers are losing money or just cut into their existing margins?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yes, so definitely there are situations where there are farms that have closed. We know in PEI that they've stopped growing. But yeah, it's a situation where, if we look at the economies of scale for how these farms are operating, they're determining whether it's best to stay open and keep going during the worst situations of COVID, or if they should be shutting down. It's not, to be able to say it's as black as white on whether they're being profitable or whether they're actually going bankrupt. It's not that easy of a picture to paint.
Okay,
but
appreciate that.
It's a huge cost for them right now.
And the markets are very volatile right now.
I want to go to the comment that was made about the Olympic average or the weighted average. You said that we should just get rid of that. As quickly as you could, Mr. Kosleg, could you explain what you would see as an alternative? in about 20 seconds?
Yeah, I think that essentially, if you take a look at the averages that are currently in place without elimination of that weighted average, or taking a look at another option entirely, I think if Ag Canada could take a look at that. There are certain situations where expanding industries like mushrooms, it doesn't necessarily work well to their benefit, and we're trying to help here. We're not trying to limit.
I certainly appreciate the testimony that was made. I mean, Mr. Kolig, you said at one point that there's been no programs available, but I do want to note the fact that there's the emergency business account that was available to many farmers, I assume, including the mushroom industry, the wage subsidy, Farm Credit Canada, the BCAP, Agri-Invest, which I know is available to your certain. So I know there's challenges, but I think I took a bit of exception to the fact that none of our programs have been able to be offered. I want to take my comments over to Mr. Forth, if I could. Charlie Keddy is in my riding. He's someone that speaks highly about your leadership. I know this was a challenging time. So first of all, I'm going to say thank you to farms for their continued work to get workers into the country. You mentioned the 86.5%, and that's a number that correlates with what the minister had told our committee last time she was here. Is it fair to say that most of the barriers that are the challenges that you face in terms of bringing workers in are actually in the countries of origin in terms of their countries opening airspace or perhaps even having their own processing? Can you explain to that?
Yes, it is definitely in the country of in the supply country. Example: Trinidad and Tobago still haven't decided if they're going to send workers or not. Apparently, they talk about every Thursday, and tomorrow's another Thursday, so hopefully they open it up. Eastern Caribbean just opened up. There's a lot of problems with logistics in Mexico right now. We were lucky to have a lot of people cleared prior to the epidemic, and now, of course, all governments are slowed down, and paperwork goes very slowly. So
thank you.
We're doing what we can.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Forth.
much, Mr.
Thank you,
Forth.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blois. And that, unfortunately, is all the time we have for this first panel. But I certainly want to thank the Canadian Mushroom Growers Association, Ryan Koslag and Janet Creighton, and also from the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, Cyr Couturier, and also Portia McDonald Dewhurst. Thank you very much. And also from the Foreign Agriculture Resource Management Service, Ken Forth, and our apologies, Ms. Williams, that we could not get you on, but perhaps the next time. So thank you all. We shall suspend for 5 minutes and be back in 5, everyone, to we'll have the sound test for everybody else. And thank you, and we'll see you in 5. Thanks. Okay, well, welcome to our second panel, second hour. We shall call the meeting to order again. And from the second hour, we have Dairy Farmer of Canada, Monsieur Pierre Lampron, Président. Bienvenue, Monsieur Lampron.
Pierre Lampron, President.
Welcome. And Mr. Bobby Matheson, Vice President at Advocacy. And also from the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, Monsieur Mathieu Frigon. Bienvenue, Monsieur Frigon.
Welcome, Mr. Frigon. You are President and Chief Executive.
And also Mr. Barrett, Michael Barrett, Chair. So welcome to all of you. We'll start with a 7-minute opening statement. And Dairy Farmers of Canada, whoever wants to do it, go ahead. You're on.
Oui, ben bonjour, je vais commencer. Mon nom est Pierre Lampron. Je suis.
Hello, I'll begin. I'm Pierre Lampron. I am, in fact, the president here. I'm accompanied by David Wiens, our vice president, as you mentioned, and the chair of Dairy Farmers Manitoba. Also, we have Bobby Matheson, our vice president, advocacy. So on behalf of all Canadian dairy farmers, Dairy Farmers of Canada welcomes the opportunity to offer its perspective on the Canadian response to COVID-19 pandemic. Like many other sectors of the Canadian economy, COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative repercussion on dairy farming. Preliminary estimates indicate the total monetary impact of the pandemic on the dairy sector, including farm revenue losses and extraordinary costs, could reach as much as $347 million in 2020. Given the unpredictability of this pandemic, DFC continues to monitor those costs closely and will provide revised estimates as necessary. The pandemic caused sudden, rapid fluctuations in the demand for milk and dairy products from an initial period of rush buying at the outset to significant declines in demand as consumers adopted new consumption patterns. These unprecedented peaks and valleys in demand were largely attributable to the widespread closures of hotels and restaurants and the institutional sector, what's called the HRI sector. The exercise of recalibrating production to keep in line with the demand has made it all the more complex. A cow can't be turned off like a tap, and fluid milk is highly perishable and can't really be stored. The monetary impacts of the pandemic on dairy production include lost revenue and costs of milk disposal and producer-related costs under the Canadian Dairy Commission storage programs, as farmers have to cover some of the carrying charges under their programs. Our federation estimates that the disposal costs have already reached $40 million and could reach $50 million by the end of this pandemic when combined with storage costs. The sector's adjustments have enabled it to eliminate the need for milk disposal for the time being. So how did dairy farmers adjust to this shifting context? Milk boards quickly took steps to reduce milk production and worked with the industry stakeholders to put in place various measures to balance production with the rapidly evolving marketplace. Now, this was no small feat because simultaneously we had to ensure ongoing supplies of healthy, nutritious Canadian milk, and we hope to get back to normal in the coming months. We've also worked with the Canadian Dairy Commission to position its storage programs, butter and cheese, to help deal with the surplus milk problem. To that end, we want to take the opportunity to thank the government and the opposition parties for recent modifications and amendments to the Canadian Dairy Commission Act. While we've welcomed recent announcements that will benefit the broader agricultural sectors, some industries have been more severely affected than others and would require additional government support. Now I'll turn over the floor to David. David Wiens.
So the question is, what role does supply management play during the pandemic? The timelines of the dairy sector's response to the challenges caused by COVID-19 is a testament to the agility and the efficiency of Canada's system of supply management, which has enabled a coordinated response to the impacts of the pandemic throughout the dairy supply chain while limiting impacts on Canadian consumers. Let's take a look at what is happening in the dairy sectors in the US and the EU, who, in the absence of supply management, were not well positioned to act quickly or collectively in response to the crisis. As an example, according to Dairy Farmers of America, dairy farmers in the US were forced to dispose 14 million liters of milk per day at the peak of the crisis. Without any measures on production controls, the European Milk Board, which represents dairy farmers in the EU, asked for funding to help reduce production, while the US government recently announced a $2.9 billion bailout for dairy farmers in that country. So then what support does the dairy sector need from government? Despite the losses, at this time, dairy farmers are not seeking financial support from government to address the impacts of COVID-19. Why? Well, because supply management has proven its ability to limit the impacts on our industry compared to other industries and countries. Unfortunately, supply management is not designed to offset the loss of dairy production transferred to dairy farmers in other countries. This is a net loss of market. To be clear, this means that a greater number of dairy products on our shelves will be made from foreign milk. In fact, by 2026, 18% of our Canadian dairy production will have been transferred to imports from abroad. So if you want to support your domestic supply management, this domestic dairy industry, if you support a safe and secure Canadian dairy supply chain, we ask that you formalize the commitments to mitigate the impacts of trade agreements and announce a schedule for the compensation. In closing, dairy farmers want to do their share to feed the nation. This is why, beyond the existing programs, dairy farmers across the country have donated over $10 million in products to Canadian food banks to support Canadians in need. It's also why we remain hard at work on farms across this great nation, producing high-quality domestic agricultural products that will help cement our food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weens. And now we'll move to the Dairy Processor Association, up to 7 minutes. Go ahead. Whoever wants to go.
Thank you. I'll start. On behalf of the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to appear today to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on Canada's dairy processing industry. I'm the chair of DPAC, the board, plus also I'm the president and CEO of Agri-Food Cooperative, with small and medium enterprise-sized facilities across Canada. And joining me today is Mathieu Frigon, the president and CEO of DPAC. In these difficult times, DPAC is certainly grateful to those who continue to be able to work diligently to provide Canadians with essential goods and services. Like all Canadians, we are especially thankful for the hard work and dedication of our health workers. I want to obviously highlight the work done by the dairy sector to ensure continuity of dairy product supply in Canada. These are unprecedented times, and dairy producers and processors working together are doing their part. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, the dairy industry has donated almost 5 million liters, which has been processed into nutritious dairy products and distributed to food banks across Canada. This speaks to the strong commitment of dairy producers and processors towards their communities. COVID-19 has put a lot of pressure on all aspects of the country's economic and social infrastructure. Canada's food manufacturers are no exception, and dairy processors are under tremendous strain today as they adapt to the challenges brought on by COVID-19. Providing Canadians with a continuous and ample supply of nutritious dairy products while protecting employees' health remains a top priority of dairy processors. Back to you.
Je vais y aller en français. Dépendamment de leur...
I'll go into French. Depending on the product line and the markets they serve, most dairy processors saw their revenues drop between 0 and 50% due to the decline in the food services market. On the other hand, dairy processors have seen increased costs related to COVID-19, increased absenteeism, costs of personal PPE and health screening, and increased working distancing required. The combination of declining sales and rising costs means that dairy producers are under significant financial stress due to much lower or even negative bottom line results. We wish to thank the government for agreeing to the industry's request to increase the CDC's line of credit to $500 million. We also recognize and appreciate the emergency support programs announced by the federal government to help businesses mitigate the impact of the pandemic. However, these programs are often insufficient to meet the needs of food processors. Therefore, we recommend that the current support programs be expanded along two lines. The Emergency Processing Fund, $77.5 million, should be increased significantly. It's also important that all food processing sectors be subject to the same criteria and be treated equitably when these amounts are allocated. And secondly, under its current structure, the CEWS, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, will leave some food manufacturers without support because revenue declines will not meet the 30% threshold for April and May. We propose the government provide a sliding scale of support for supporting income reduction and sliding between 10 and 30%. Michael?
Context, the impact of COVID-19 in the dairy sector. At full implementation, when considering the latest three agreements, Canadian dairy processors will lose $320 million per year on the net margin. On top of the market access concessions, CUSMA has a clause that imposes caps on worldwide exports of Canadian milk powder, which will make it increasingly difficult to balance the supply and manage system. We appreciate the opportunity the government gave to the dairy industry to voice their concerns and work towards a compensation scheme to mitigate the impact of trade agreements to the mitigation working group. However, while dairy processors have worked diligently and submitted their mitigation plan in 2019, we haven't yet heard back from the government. This is extremely disappointing. We trust that the government will keep its promises to fully and fairly compensate dairy processors for their losses. As such, we would like to remind the committee of their twofold approach to mitigate the negative impact of trade agreements. First, a dairy processor compensation program, which would aim at supporting investment in the dairy processing capacity, competitiveness, and modernization. And that program would include tools such as non-repayable contributions for investments, refundable tax credits, etc. And secondly, allocation of dairy import licenses, known as tariff rate quotas or TRQs for short, to the Canadian dairy processors. Mathieu?
J'aimerais revenir sur...
I'd like to come back quickly on the point Michael's just made about the TRQs. We want to reiterate today the importance of allocating dairy TRQs to dairy processors. Last week, in fact, we sent a memo on this subject to several government departments, pointing out that allocating the vast majority of dairy TRQs to the processors would minimize the impact on our Canadian dairy market. Mr. Frigon, I think you might want to put your computer on the French channel. Are you on the French channel now? Yes, I think so. Go ahead. So giving it to Canadian processors would minimize the impact on the Canadian dairy market. In fact, the viability of the dairy sector is at stake in this situation. Dairy processors possess the expertise and distribution networks required to import a wide variety of dairy products in a way that it will be the least disruptive to the Canadian domestic market. The government must not repeat the mistake it did with CETA, where it allocated more than half of our cheese quotas, for example, went to non-dairy stakeholders. These individuals or stakeholders did not have a vested interest in the market knowledge like the dairy processors do, and in importing dairy that would minimize the impact of existing production lines and manufacturing platforms in Canada. Canadian dairy producers continue to innovate, invest, and maintain and generate well-paying jobs across this country. Additional imports that are poorly planned or poorly targeted will only undermine the survival of many businesses. Now, of course, this is going to come into effect on the 1st of July. Unfortunately, that's not going to give us much time to adjust and to plan ahead for the changes required. So these decisions on TRQ, the imports, I hope will be announced very shortly by GAC. Michael?
Quand le temps est expiré.
So,
Mr. Frigon?
Sorry. In conclusion, the pandemic has brought unprecedented changes to the entire Canadian economy.
I guess we're up.
Go ahead.
The time.
Sorry.
The time is up, Mr. Baird. Sorry. Let me just switch to English here. Okay. So now we'll start our question round. Just a second here. Alors, Monsieur Lehoux pour 5 minutes. Monsieur Lehoux pour 6 minutes. Allez-y.
Mr. Lehoux, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much to our witnesses for their participation this evening. I'd like to talk to the producers' representative, Mr. Lampron. You explained to us the whole situation that this pandemic caused. Quite serious losses for your producers, but you also demonstrated great flexibility and responding quickly in limiting the damages. Yes, some hundreds of liters of milk initially, perhaps millions, but you put an end to that wastage very quickly. I'd like to hear your opinion, your perspective on what's going to happen post-COVID-19. Important agreements that were signed in the past, and agreements, partnership, as you said, CETA, and then there's the TPP-CP, Trans-Pacific. Now, commitments were made over the last year by the government, and we are far from what's been proposed between the two parties, the producers and the government, to remunerate the losses or compensate the losses. Well, thank you. This pandemic, COVID-19, was one of these one-off spontaneous events. Nobody could foresee it. But we did use our supply management system very, very deftly, particularly with the internal structures, Canadian Dairy Commission and marketing allocations. But unfortunately, there's going to be some losses, and it's going to be an infringement of about 18% of the market share by non-Canadian producers. This market will be supplied by producers from elsewhere, and there are no tools within the management system, the supply management system, to counter the trade deals that have been signed. We've had engagement, we've had some promises made on compensation for the first years, but once CUSMA comes into effect fully, well, how about the Trans-Pacific and Europe? What shortages still have to be paid that have been committed by government? 1.75 billion. We got first-year payments on that. I don't have the exact numbers, but there's some significant amount of money left that producers will need to adapt and to make up for losses. Mr. Lampron, did you receive any further proposal or offers from the minister or the government how and when these monies might be paid out? You need to have it to maintain the stability of the production system in Canada. No, we don't have the details. That's what we're looking for now. We want more detail. We want to know when. We'd like to know how much, and perhaps an understanding of how and when these will be planned out. Well, the new CUSMA coming into effect very soon now, in 2020. How about these agreements between the government and the dairy sector? I think significant payments have been made over the last 2.5 months in various sectors, but perhaps not the dairy sector. Do you have any engagement as to when these payments will be forthcoming? No, we have the commitment that it will occur, but we would like to see a little bit more formality in the process. We need the money now, in fact, and it's not the first time. It's not the first time that we've heard promises of this kind. I see that you're in great solidarity with others who are under supply management systems who have not yet received too much information from the government. So perhaps the millions of liters of milk that were eliminated in the States in particular shows the importance of the role of supply management in our Canadian agriculture system. So thank you very much, Mr. Lampron. And I have one point perhaps to make for the processors.
Actuellement, là, on comprend que
As far as transformers are concerned, I hear an echo in my headset as well. So I'm sorry. Now let's talk about dairy processors. You talked about the TRQs that would have an impact. Yes, COVID is amongst us, but in the 77 million that was proposed to compensate processors, it's far from satisfying the demand. The program is ill-adapted. Do you think it's the case for dairy processing in Canada? In fact, the program that was announced is not to compensate dairy processors. This 77.5 million is for all food processors in Canada. If you want to talk about compensation, in our presentation, we were talking about a compensation given the trade agreements. There's a lot of uncertainty, like the dairy farmers said. So if we want to make the link with the TRQs, the only thing we need is more stability. So we need the TRQs for dairy processors. Yes, Monsieur Frigon. That being said, what do you think of what the current government is offering in terms of TRQs? Well, firstly, as I said in my presentation, we have to support exports and imports. I know that the department is working really hard and should make these announcements shortly, and that's what we hope for. But there is an important impact on July 1st rather than August 1st. Yes, Mr. Chair, what's going on? Well, that's the time you had, unfortunately, Mr. Leroux. Monsieur Drouin, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank all witnesses today. It's not the first time that we have the opportunity to discuss with you. Mr. Lampron, I want to thank Dairy Farmers of Canada. 2 months ago, I didn't think we had to explain that there was not a direct link between the cow and the milk paint. So you've done a really good job, and you're absolutely right. The supply management system is working even during this crisis, and I want to congratulate all producers of my region. And I know that Dairy Farmers of Canada were really generous. Even local organizations had the opportunity to provide hand sanitizing bottles and others. So I really raise my hat to the dairy producers. So what do you think will be the issues for the next months? I know it's hard to say because we don't know what will be the demand. But for your producers, what could be the next issues like in July or August? Well, forecasts, we don't actually know what will happen. We don't know what will happen with the demand. Will consumers go back to their usual consumption? Will they focus still on local markets? The demand is very elastic. We've reduced our production, and if the demand increases, we have to satisfy the demand. So it was important to increase the credit margin for DFC in order to satisfy the future demand. But it's very hard to forecast. You've seen how hot it is today. We have good facilities, but this can have an impact on the production level, a lower one. We have to take into account the weather. We can't predict that. Thank you so much. Mr. Frigon, you said that you had some talk with the government. We talked about compensations, about TRQs. When we talk about potential losses, what dollar value was it made? Because the difference between the American currency and the Canadian currency isn't the same today as it was last winter. So what are the anticipated losses? There could be an impact on our margin, but it won't be substantial. Within the working group, we've calculated $320 million a year following these 3 trade agreements, including the limits on exports given CUSMA. And do you have an opinion, given that some of your members have their facilities in Canada, in the States too? So how about those who have facilities in the States and who have import licenses? They could easily transfer their production to the States. Do you think that the permits should be the same for those who have facilities in both countries? Or should we support those who have facilities only in Canada? We haven't looked at that issue, but you understand that some may be concerned with that. Our producers could be worried about that. Can you imagine that? Answer, yes, I understand the concerns, but we haven't taken any position concerning the distribution of TRQs between the dairy processors, the SME versus the big corporation. We just said that it should be allocated within the dairy industry, not the non-dairy participants, because we are impacted by these trade agreements, not the brokers and others. We know that there has been some talks to increase investments in order to benefit innovation or automation in the dairy processing industry. Those who will have a higher TRQ, should they get a certain percentage? Should that be taken into account when a new investment program is announced in a couple of months or next year? I have no idea. But when the announcement is made, do you think we should take that into account to make sure that everyone is treated equally? And I'm thinking about, for example, the cheese processing. Indeed, equity is important for processors. I was talking about our annual losses of $320 million a year. If we have a compensation program, it should be allocated given the TRQs, which is there also to set up any losses. Just the TRQs, it won't work for all processors. It depends on the type of products, the type of markets. So we need those two complementary tools. And indeed, the compensation program could be better for those who don't have the TRQs. Has there been talks amongst your members? It might be difficult to answer the question, but we know that the restaurant industry is not as it used to be, and this does have an impact on your members and on producers who feed the processors with products. So if the restoration industry does not come back as before, is your industry ready to adapt? Answer quickly, please, sir. It's not obvious for some. There has been a loss of earnings, and it could be greater because they were selling a lot of their products to the restaurant industry. Mr. Perron, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Hello to all our witnesses. Thanks for being there. Mr. Lampron, when I ask questions concerning compensation, given the trade agreements, I'm told that this is not a priority today. Can you explain to us how important it is to get that compensation today and how it could support you? Well, this is well documented, all the losses linked to these trade agreements. We were hoping that it would start in August because the dairy year starts in August, and as my colleagues said, we have export constraints. So yes, we have to adapt. These sums of money are important, but we had to give up a big part of our market share given these trade agreements. What we're asking are direct payments to producers and to dairy farmers. So you already felt the impact, so you need the money today. And you want direct payments. Okay, fine. I think the message is clear. You did thank the government and the dairy farmers of Canada. Maybe we should have reacted earlier in the crisis. Then we would have not had to waste all this milk. Well, in 2 weeks we had the support. Let's try and be positive and think about the future. How nice of you, sir. You did talk about the importance of the supply management system. Some of our colleagues do realize how important the supply management system is important and that we should maintain it. Eventually, we should have a law, an act to protect it.
We've given a lot over the last few years, our dairy producers, and we can no longer, we can't keep continuing to suffer these losses, but we have to protect the, we might even have to get a different law to protect the supply management systems. Well, I found you very, very diplomatic. Mr. Frigon, question for you. Perhaps you could describe the impact of CUSMA on your sector from your point of view. You said that it will come into effect in the 1st of August to you. Can you talk to us about that? There's going to be a huge impact of that. The first year is going to last maybe only 30 days if you wish, but there's a huge difference between the first year and the second year of this agreement. The ceiling, the cap is very, very strict in the second year. It goes down to 35,000 ton. So we have to benefit from the agreement struck in the first year only for 30 days. We're very disappointed in that, and when we learned that the implementation will occur on the 1st of July. So it was an unforeseen loss above and beyond everything else you've suffered. Okay. Can you indicate to us what the impact has been? You talked about TRQs at Europe. Most of them, or at least half, went to non-dairy stakeholders. What impact will that have? And what if we were to repeat the same mistake with the agreement with the CUSMA? Well, with 2020 hindsight, it was announced in 2017, it's created a lot of instability. We see the import of cheeses, specifically to undercut cheeses that are being produced in Canada. So it's already rocking the boat and creating some instability. Our members, of course, will take their decisions to import depending on the market, the milk markets here, of course. They're very much in tune with what the market flows are, but when you get external players coming in, they're not necessarily working with the same criteria. They're not looking at the same factors. They're not looking at how much stock is on hand, the level of production, the rate of production. And that's what we've seen over the past few years. When non-dairy stakeholders come into play, it creates a lot of instability in the market. And of course, there's volume, just crude, raw volume, and that comes into play. Mr. Perron. Okay, no problem. I'll adjust my mic. So, Mr. Frigon, if I can continue. If the TRQ are not allocated in a great majority to producers or transformers, or producers, in fact, you're going to end up with a more chaotic market, unstable market. But you'd also like to see a timetable for this coming into effect. Yes, absolutely. It's going to just make more perturbances in the marketplace. There's already enough instability in the market as it is now. The producers, because of COVID-19, the early introduction of CUSMA, if you will, one trade deal after another, in fact. So these TRQs have to be allocated mostly to the processing sector. Well, the discussions are underway, and the decision will be forthcoming. 1st of July is approaching us at great speed. So we, the committee, should be very sensitive to this issue, the very large impacts on the sector. Well, thank you very much. I think my time has probably elapsed. And I thank you very much for your participation, for having appeared here today. And we have heard your arguments with a sympathetic ear, and I hope that the rest of government will do the same. Thank you very much, Mr. Perron. Now, Mr. McGregor, you have 6 minutes, Mr. McGregor.
Chair, and good afternoon to all of our witnesses. It's good to see you on my Zoom panel. Maybe I'd like to start with the Dairy Farmers of Canada. I was one of the members of Parliament who received a technical briefing on the Act to amend the Canadian Dairy Commission to give it increased borrowing authority. And during that technical briefing, the officials let us know that dairy farmers had been forced to dump 30 million liters of milk, and I know that must have pained your members greatly because of the pride you have in our supply managed system. And I kept on wondering, through that, like when I heard that figure, I kept on wondering, and you see all of the foreign dairy products on our shelves, like, would that have ever been necessary if we hadn't given away so much of our domestic market share? But I really appreciated your comments on just, how supply management has allowed us to weather this storm that we're in because of our ability to manage production. But I think, going forward, what kind of a commitment do you really want to see so we can build resiliency into our supply management system so that it's there for future generations and so that we can withstand further shocks like this in the future? And I think you need to just unmute your mic.
Sorry, just a bit too quick off the mark here. Thanks. Yes, it's a good question, and I think it's important to, first of all, with the Canadian Dairy Commission, the ability to increase the storage is important for us because it does help us in terms of where we had surplus in the beginning, they could put it in storage for a time when as we now have reduced production. Certainly, the trade agreements in the past have exacerbated the situation because we have already lost production from where we would otherwise have been. Another important factor is that as we go through this pandemic and as we come out the other end, we are not going to come to the same place anymore because by then CUSMA will have taken effect and we will have lost a further market share. So those are part of what we're really trying to emphasize here is that supply management. We can handle things like downturns, although this was extreme. Like we have never experienced something like this, so that tested us to our limits. But then what supply management cannot do is to have our foundation continuously being undermined. And whenever we allow further access to the Canadian dairy market, that is in fact what is happening. So every time there's more access given, it weakens us, and then it makes it more difficult for us to withstand the kind of challenges that we've seen within this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so that is a real concern there that in the future, it does make us make us a little bit weaker because it's that foundation that we have, that supply management rests on, makes everything else happen. And so as we move towards that 18% foreign access to our Canadian dairy markets, that does overall undermine our ability to weather the kind of storms that we faced within this pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And in my remaining time, I'll just turn to the dairy processors. I think all of us on this committee agree that agriculture and agri-food are going to be a central part of Canada's recovery to this crisis. And just regarding the TRQ allocation, I understand the argument why our processors need to have more TRQs. Your in-depth understanding of the local market and making sure that our domestic supply of dairy products is not interrupted by foreign imports. But can you just give me a sense of what is, if we do get that increased TRQ allocation secured for you, what's that going to mean in terms of an economic shot in the arm that will help your processors really lead in your regions as part of our economic recovery to this crisis?
If I could maybe address that, certainly it's a fundamental, I appreciate the question, is a fundamental with regards to being able to ensure that the TRQ allocation is to those that have bricks and mortar within the country. There has been billions of dollars spent in investing in Canadian processing capacity and capabilities. And when you talk about the shot in the arm, what it's going to do is reaffirm that continued investment. Certainly the CETA allocation of TRQs was not a shot in the arm for Canadian dairy processors to be able to invest in cheese manufacturing in Canada. So being able to look at that investment or that TRQ that gets allocated, and we're certainly asking for north of 90%. What it does from the shot in the arm, it gives us that ability to be able to understand the stability in the marketplace, to build on what Dave Wiens is talking about, because you got to have stability on the supply side. You also have the stability on the capacity side. There's no reason, there's not by surprise, we're both sitting here together. because there's no sense in processing if you have producing if you have no processing. What we need the shot in the arm is for stability and return. Our members are seeing 30 to 50% decline in sales, 80% decline in EBITDA. That type of COVID impact is going to have considerable impact. So it may not be the shot in the arm in the sense of a punch in the shoulder, but maybe an adrenaline shot that allows us to be able to see stability in the market.
Great, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Just hang on here. Thank you, Mr. McGregor and Mr. Barrett. So that concludes our second panel. I want to thank our witnesses today, Dairy Farmer of Canada, Mr. Pierre Lampron, President, Mr. David Weens, and Bobby Matheson. Thanks for being here. And also from the Dairy Processor Association of Canada, Mathieu Frigon, and also Michael Barrett. So,
Monsieur le
thank you so
Président.
much for being here.
Monsieur le Président.
Oh,
Chair, Mr. Chair. I'm not point of order here, but I'd like to point something out if I may. Thank you. We know that next Monday is going to be National Milk Day. We don't have a glass in hand, but perhaps we should raise a good glass of milk. And on the 1st of June, everybody can celebrate and mark Dairy Day. We completely agree with you, Mr. Leroux. Thank you very much for this. We will take a picture together and we'll put it on social media for you. How's that? Thank you for reminding us.
Thanks to witness, and I just want to a last note before we leave for our members. As you know, the motion 7 has been passed. Permission to continue to sit beyond Friday, and I will reach out to the vice chairs, and we can talk about how start the discussion as to how we want to proceed. What kind of themes and that. So I will reach out before the end of the week if it's okay with you, and you can start talking amongst yourself, and we'll find a way to how we're going to move forward. So again, if there's nothing else, I want to thank everyone, and we shall see you. Oh, there's a glass of milk, Madame Desbiens. Great. So we shall see you on Friday. Thank you. Motion adjourned.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Merci, au revoir.